Hi everyone, it's Dr. Michelle Dickinson here, aka Nano Girl, and I am super excited to introduce to you Astronaut Commander Chris Hadfield. Hi Chris.
Hello, it is a delight to be sitting next to you. Hi everybody.
Welcome to New Zealand.
Thank you. Oh, it's great.
So Chris, you have spent 166 days in space. You are the first Canadian to have lived on board the International Space Station.
Pretty lucky and amazing, huh?
And you have an amazing YouTube channel and social media where we can see things like
how do you brush your teeth in space, and what happens when you wring a flannel, and...
My question for you, though, is you have several books out, but one of my favorite books is called The Darkest Dark.
The Darkest Dark.
It's a children's book all about space and a little boy's dream about going to space.
Right.
What made you want to write a children's book?
I think it's important to try and communicate with everybody, and just because someone is young, that doesn't somehow mean their ideas aren't really important. In fact, if you're investing your time, you're probably better to spend time with a young person because they have so much more life in front of them. And so if you can help them understand things a little more clearly or make better decisions in their life, then you've probably been more effective. And one of the biggest things we all face, of course, is being afraid, is fear. And how do you deal with fear in your life? It's normal to be afraid, especially when you're little, because you don't know how to do things yet. And so the natural reaction is to be afraid. So how do you deal with being afraid? And so the book, The Darkest Dark, naturally talks...
The Darkest Dark naturally talks
about the fear of the dark. But it's more than that. It is how do you deal with fear and recognize that within your fear is both your own courage and your own way to solve the problem, but also the mystery of the things that used to scare you and where that can take you. And then the book, of course, eventually ends up being a book about a real person. It's not just a children's book, but it's the reality of the fact that this little boy who was afraid of the dark can actually grow up and do a spacewalk out in the incredible blackness of the universe, and it's real what can happen when you overcome your fears or find a way to deal with your own courage and find your own bravery. So that's why I wrote the book, and I can actually grow up and do a spacewalk out in the incredible blackness of the universe. Delighted that kids, there's a song called The Darkest Dark, and kids all around the world have read the book, and I'm really pleased.
And you, as a little boy, were inspired by the Apollo 11 moon landing. You sat there, you watched it on TV, and you said, I'm going to be an astronaut.
First I was inspired by pretend people, by, people in comic books, and people in science fiction books, and then in movies and on television, Star Trek and that type of thing. I was really inspired by that imaginary world. But then, as you say, people started doing something that used to be imaginary. People started flying in space, and people walked on the moon when I was 9 years old, just turning 10. And I just thought, that's a comic book turned real. Imagine if you were an X-woman or an X-man or whatever the right word is, if you were one of the X-people. And, it's a comic book thing. But imagine if we were sitting here and suddenly Michelle turned blue and could fly around the room, and that was real. It would change your whole view of what you might actually become in the world. It's not just an imaginary thing. It's an option. It's a choice. And that's what it looked like to me when they walked on the moon. It went from being something imaginary to being something that maybe I might have a chance to do. And so it changed all the things that I chose to do after that.
Interesting. I became a nanotechnologist because I watched Star Trek and I saw these things that could potentially be real. And
same thing.
But they seemed almost impossible to achieve, and yet you have still strived forwards and said the percentage chance of you being an astronaut was pretty slim, especially in Canada.
Well, Canada, when I chose to be an astronaut in Canada, we didn't have astronauts. It wasn't hard to be an astronaut then. It was impossible to be an astronaut then. But I thought, the only thing I can count on for sure is that things change. If you want things to stay the same, then things will have to change. That's just how it works. So I knew that things would change, so that, like the lighting, I knew that things would change, so I thought, all I can really do is change myself. Then things will have to change. That's just how it works. So I knew that things would change, so that, like the lighting, I knew that things would change. So I thought, all I can really do is change myself and get myself ready. Whether you're going to be a nanotechnologist, or in my case, be an engineer, and then be a pilot, and then be a test pilot, which is like an engineer and a pilot put together, and then see what happens in the future. And amazingly enough, Canada decided to start having astronauts, and because of all the choices I'd made since I was that little fearful boy, I got selected to be one of Canada's astronauts and served for 21 years and flew in space 3 times. You probably are amazed at how your life has turned out. I am equally as amazed at the things I've had a chance to do so far.
And you've been able to share it with us because you were able to, through social media, share a lot of these expeditions. Now, I have a bunch of kids from around New Zealand who are desperate to ask you some questions.
Great, ask away.
Okay, here we go. I have a bunch of
around
kids
New Zealand who are desperate to ask you some questions.
Great, ask away.
Okay, here we go.
If you've submitted a question, have a listen out. This may be from you. Kevin, who is 8, would like to know, when you are in space, can you see the countries in the world on a globe like they're all shaped out, or do they look like a blurry color?
Hi, Kevin. You can see the world with a clarity you wouldn't believe. It is beautiful. You can see the textures. You can see the shadows when it's dawn or dusk. When the sun is getting close to the horizon, it really brings out the changes in the surface. Like all around Auckland, because there's all the sharp little volcanic hills, you can see those shadows. But on a globe or on a map, we paint the countries different colors, so it's easy to tell, where Canada stops and the United States starts. That's not there. All the colors of the world are natural. But even still, you can tell what's what. You know the shapes of things. And some countries, like if you go across Australia, there are some farms that are very big. And one side of a road will have sheep and one side of a road will have crops. And so it'll look very different from space. You can see where the road is just because of how the land is used. And so that's true for some countries. You can see the line between countries just because of how they use the land. But mostly, the world looks like one beautiful, natural, integrated place. That's what the world looks like. You'll like it.
Sounds pretty special. Josh, who is 11, would like to know, can you describe how zero gravity feels?
Josh, it feels like magic. It feels like you have a superpower. Like somebody just tapped you on the head and said, Michelle, you can fly. And suddenly, Michelle could just fly up out of her chair and do a backflip. And she could grab me and just throw me across the room effortlessly. It's as if someone just instantaneously gave you a magic power. And it makes you laugh. It's fun. It's joyful. It's magic. I mean, it's real and it's physics and you know why it's happening. But at the same time, it's great. I hope you get a chance to do it. You'll love it.
Master L, who is 9, has asked, what does space sound like?
What's Marcel?
Master L.
Master L. Master L. What does space sound like? When I make a noise right now, la, it is the air coming out of my lungs and shaking my vocal cords and actually getting the air moving. It moves the molecules of the air. La, and these moving molecules of air go through and they go in Michelle's ear and they go into her eardrum and shake her eardrum. And that's what she hears, is how the air carried that vibration from here to there. But if there was no air in between us, I could still shake my vocal cords, la, but there would be nothing to carry that vibration over to Michelle's ear. So I could make noise, but it wouldn't go anywhere. I couldn't even hear it, except the vibration through my own skull and flesh. And here's an experiment you can think of. Imagine how loud the sun is. I mean, it's a huge explosion. It's a big thermonuclear explosion that's going on all the time. If we could hear what was going on in space, we'd all be deaf, because the sun would drown out everything else. So fortunately, we can't hear sound in space. It's a good thing. Otherwise, the noise of the sun we couldn't even talk to each other.
Sophia, who is 8, what did you miss most when you were in space?
Sophia, I didn't miss a lot of stuff while I was in space. It's sort of like, I don't know if you've ever been to the fair or a carnival, but maybe when you're riding one of those rides at a carnival, and it's just, wow, it's fun. If someone said, hey, while you're riding the ride at the fair, what do you miss most? And you're sort of like, I don't miss anything. I'm on a ride at the fair. I'm having a great time. And spaceflight was sort of like that. It's not like I was up there wishing I was somewhere else. I was doing something that I loved and that I really wanted to do. I mean, it would have been nice to have my family with me and my dog. I have a pug named Albert. I would have loved to have had just some nice, simple, fresh food, piece of pizza, you know, nice, sloppy, kind of normal stuff. But the magic of where I was, it was way bigger than the tiny little feelings I had of stuff that I wished were there. No, I didn't spend time in space missing stuff. I spent time in space loving where I was.
Now, in your other book, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, you teach us all about, how if we're successful on the first attempt, we don't really learn anything, and to prepare yourself for failure, to make sure that you expect the unexpected, and I think that's and I would like to bring something unexpected to you.
Oh.
Seeing you're in New Zealand, here you go.
Uh-huh.
What is that?
Well, it's a green oblate spheroid with a little thing on one end. I would guess that this is an edible fruit.
It is. It is